Welcome to the Beltway Wars Invitational Draft Recap Show with your host Adam Jackson and Patrick Wheelton. Throughout the show, we're going to be going over each team's draft picks, assigning a grade, and going through the best, the worst, the questionable picks of each team. So to get this started, we're just going to talk about the draft overall, what we saw, what we thought, certain trends that we kind of noticed throughout the draft. And Patrick, welcome to the show, and give us your thoughts on the draft overall.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, this is great. It was an excellent draft. Thanks for everyone for being on time and showing up and giving it your all in this draft. It's what we said. It's the 10th year, so it's a milestone for the league. It was a fun draft, and it's going to be a fun season. I thought overall, I felt like I jumped into a time machine back to 2010 when, running backs were the prime targets in the first couple rounds. If you look at this draft of the first 15 picks, you've got 13 running backs, only 2 wide receivers taken in the first 15 picks. That's how these drafts used to go 10, 12 years ago. And we know because we're getting old. We've been playing that long. And longer, but that's how these fantasy drafts used to go. And then over the last decade, they'd sort of gradually shifted away from it. More receivers, some tight ends sneaking into the top round, maybe a quarterback or so here and there. But we're back to business with running backs in the first round. That was really my big takeaway because, as we'll see as we go through some of these picks, it really changed the nature of this draft, particularly in the first 5 rounds.
I agree with that sentiment. Huge amount of wide receivers and talented wide receivers going very, very early in the draft. I'm kind of curious to wonder if going to a half-point PPR actually showed more value towards those pass-catching running backs than years before. Then didn't really have an emphasis on them before. Overall, I thought that it was a pretty standard draft. The only thing that I saw really was that through the 30, 35 mock drafts that I did, is that quarterbacks went a little early than what I'm used to. Patrick Mahomes started round 3, Josh Allen, Murray, Lamar Jackson, all kind of going early. So I think that a lot of teams in our league have really valued the quarterback position and want to have a solid number each week out of that position. Pat, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my first thought on that is, did you really do 35 mock drafts? That's pretty impressive. A little bit obsessive. Oh, I can't tell by looking at this team. But anyway,
boy.
I agree with that. The experts, the so-called experts, always poo-poo the quarterbacks going early. But the reality is, and we've discussed this when we were looking at the offensive categories and defensive scoring in the offseason, this has become an offensive league. You've got to have quarterbacks that are putting up big points week in and week out. Gone are the days when you can have a fantasy team with a quarterback and get to 18 or 20 points and be happy with it. You're looking for those big numbers from quarterbacks these days. Even though I believe we are in a 4-point per passing touchdown league, even still, regardless, these guys are putting up yards. They're throwing for a huge number of touchdowns. It seems like every year another quarterback is threatening some record. So it's become an offensive league, and it frankly doesn't surprise me that you've got these superstar quarterbacks going early.
I could not agree more. So let's get into it real quick. Just the order that we're going to be going in is just draft position order. It's good enough for the draft. It should be good enough for the show. So the first team that we're going to talk about today is Reisterstown Rebels, led by Charlie Wynn. One of the biggest trash talkers in the league. Always tries to get things going. He had the first overall pick, which is pretty standard, pretty industry-wide, is that people decided that it was going to be Christian McCaffrey, and he went that route. Pat, what did you think about his other draft picks?
Well, we've talked before and mentioned it in the draft day video that we've recorded that Charlie, since he's been in the league for I think 4 years now, 4 or 5 years, he's gotten better every year. He's finished higher or equal to the year prior in every single year that he's been in this league. He did pretty darn well last year, and I think he's got a team that could threaten for a championship this year. And here's a spoiler alert. Charlie actually is going to get my highest ranked team in this draft. Now,
oh, wow.
It's pretty easy to to go with the first pick of Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, when you start that way, it's kind of hard to screw the rest of it up. You definitely can, but it makes it that much more difficult. McCaffrey, by far and away, the leader in the clubhouse for first round pick, and probably will live up to the hype, assuming he can stave off any kind of injuries. So that was an obvious one. I really like the fact that he's also got the best of the best at quarterback. So he's got the best running back in the game. He's got the best quarterback in the game. That's a recipe for success. Taking Patrick Mahomes when it came back to him at the start of the third round, pick 3.1, really, really great to have those two guys forming the core of your team. I think in terms of a weakness, if I had to identify one, it would be the tight end position. Obviously, when you take running backs and wide receivers early on in the draft, and you let tight end go, and I know this because I've done it, and I did it this year, and I do it frequently. You go down, you take Robert Tonyan of the Packers in the seventh round. Not a bad pick there, but I just, those middling tight ends, I have a much more you pick them early and get one of the top guys, or you pick them late and take your chances in free agency. Kind of going that middle route with Tanya, and I don't love it. I think there was some better value at other positions at that pick, but you got to have a weakness somewhere. Starting the draft with McCaffrey, Carson, and Mahomes is a recipe for success. The other pick that I would just mention that I really like in this draft is at running back. The team's fourth running backs here. James Conner, former Pittsburgh Steeler, now playing in Arizona. Taking him at the beginning of the ninth round, I think he represents really good value, especially for a fourth running back on a fantasy team. I think he's really got a chance to be something special in Arizona. I think people wrote him off in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is always chasing the next hot commodity at running back. I think Connor's got something left in the tank. If he can stay healthy, I like him a lot in Arizona, especially in the ninth round.
Now, in terms of James Conner, he's ranked the 36th running back, average draft position of 103. Now, in terms of his fantasy prospects, he does have Chase Edmonds he has to deal with. With the high-flying offense in Arizona, we're not really, or at least I'm not really sure how many times the ball is going to be on the ground. They have the famous air raid offense. He's very solid for where he's picked. The ninth round, and you're getting a 50-50 at least. And if Chase Edmonds goes down for some reason, he's a top 20 running back. But going through the rest of his team, there was two picks that kind of intrigued me the most. I'm going to go with, one of the picks that he absolutely sniped me in the draft at draft night, which is Damien Harris. Damien Harris, great prospects, and is now even better now that Sony Michel is in LA, recently traded. Damien Harris, he flashed in preseason last year, but then suffered I think it was a ankle injury that sidelined him for most of the season. He comes in as running back 30, ADP 82. In terms of drafting, I really do like that pick. I think, with Patriot running backs, there's a negative connotation saying that they're always running back by committee, but I just think he's the most talented, and I think he's going to get his chances, especially if they go away from Cam Newton to Mac Jones at the starting quarterback position, because as we know, Cam does take away from some of the goal line work that running backs can get. So I do think that will finish top 20 running backs this year, and that was a great pick, what I thought. The other pick that was, more of a questionable pick for me was picking Matt Ryan in the 12th round when you already had Patrick Mahomes in the third. Now, you're not I don't know, but I wouldn't think that there's any weeks that you're going to be starting Matt Ryan or Patrick Mahomes. So I think that was just a little bit of a wasted pick. I think you should have probably waited, or Charlie should have waited to, a couple rounds later, maybe the 16th round, targeted Trey Lance or Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins, one of those three. And, try to solidify the rest of his team. Maybe picked up another tight end just to kind of get some balance there and, plug the hot player. The more darts you throw at a position, the better chance that we're going to have at picking a winner. With that, another thing, just in terms of Charlie's team, top two wide receivers, Chris Godwin, Cooper Kupp. I'm not totally sold on them just because of how crowded their wide receiver rooms are. Chris Godwin, has Antonio Brown and Mike Evans to contend with, and Cooper Kupp has Robert Woods and a new offensive coordinator in LA. So, it's kind of hard to see that they're going to be completely consistent, but we'll see how the season shakes out. With that, what grade did you give Charlie, Pat?
Well, I already said it. I think he's the best in the league this year in terms of grade. I would give him an A. I think it's a really solid team with a good top five. It's a traditional draft. You take two running backs, you take two wide receivers, you take a quarterback. Got two of the best talents in the league in McCaffrey and Mahomes. They're absolutely electric. I give it an A.
Okay, and following up on that, I would give him an A minus. Just a little bit of questions at the wide receiver position. That's my only issue with this team. Very solid draft by Charlie. Continues to get better every year and should be a force to be reckoned with this year. Okay, moving on to yours truly at the second pick of the draft. Adam Jackson, Union Bridge Battalion, coming in. Pat, what did you think? Be nice.
Yeah, I mean, this is new territory for you. Usually you're picking at the end of these drafts for whatever reason. This is, I think, the highest you've ever picked. So, you had a pretty easy pick there with Dalvin Cook in the first. I think as we get into it, if I had to kind of stick a theme to this team, it was sort of, and Charlie's team was a good segue in terms of receivers and the competition on their individual respective teams. Mm-hmm. You pick your first wide receiver there in the fourth round with Amari Cooper, followed up by Tyler Lockett, and then 2 rounds later, T. Higgins. So your core there of Cooper, Lockett, and Higgins. I have a little bit of concern in terms of the, Dallas has a lot of wide receivers, and obviously Zeke Elliott, a lot of mouths to feed there in Dallas. Lockett has a little bit more job security in Seattle, but then you look at T. Higgins as the third receiver on this team. Jamar Chase drafted by the Bengals, looking to be pretty good in camp. Obviously, still have Tyler Boyd, who's there, so a lot of mouths to feed on a team that's not really expected to be very good. So I have my concerns in terms of the wide receiver depth, specifically that they have a lot of competition for targets. You do have a little bit of the friendship strategy going on there, having Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup, 2 Cowboys wide receivers. I guess the thought there being that, if one of those guys goes down or if one of those guys lights it up in a big way, you'll have that Cowboys offense, which will be an electric offense as long as Dak is healthy. You'll have potentially the best wide receiver threat there. Predicting those guys from game to game is going to be a challenge, and you probably know that. You've been doing it long enough. If I had to give you my best pick that I think you made here, I really like Jalen Hurts. The Eagles moving on from Carson Wentz, new quarterback drafted by the Eagles, getting him as a second quarterback late in the draft. You've got Tom Brady already. I think that he represents good value, and he's a high ceiling guy that you took a chance on in the 13th round. I really like him. I like him as a sleeper this year. I think you might find yourself in a position of being able to have the luxury of choosing between those guys week in and week out, and I think that's a good problem to have. Mm-hmm. If I had to say there's a worse pick, it's weird. I think the strength of your team is at tight end, having George Kittle, but I think the end of the second round, pick 2.11, feels a little early to me on George Kittle. Mm-hmm. What were you thinking there?
Yeah, so what I was thinking is that he was hurt last year. He should be well rested. It's just in terms of, I think that there's less weapons in San Francisco than there would be in, say, Las Vegas, where I was picking between Darren Waller or George Kittle. I just think that there's more opportunities there. He's truly the number one pass catcher in San Francisco. So I think that he's going to be utilized. But in terms of tight end, I think that Darren Waller and George Kittle are 1 and 1A. Some people have Kittle higher. Some people have Waller higher. I just pulled the trigger on Kittle. That's just how I was feeling at the moment. In terms of the other picks, I would say, this was pretty standard. The first three picks were pretty standard with what my mock drafts were going. Um, in terms of Amari Cooper, I would say that, I was going to take Robert Woods and I was going to take DJ Moore before him. So that kind of didn't work out in my favor there. But I would say that the best pick in the draft for my team would be Corey Davis. I think he's going to be a star with the Jets, and he's developed quite a good chemistry with quarterback Wilson there. I think it's Wilson. Oh my gosh, the rookie quarterback out of BYU. I think it's Wilson. Is it Wilson?
I don't know. I don't really pay attention too much to the Jets, but I totally agree with you that Corey Davis is a good pick there. I mean, the ability, the chance to get a number one wide receiver, regardless of team, there in the 9th round, I do like that pick.
Yeah, so I do think that I think I do have a lot of question marks. It didn't fall exactly the way that I wanted, taking Phillip Lindsay in the 11th round, probably starting running back on a really bad team. Tyrell Williams, in the 16th, should be the number one wide receiver in Detroit. So it seems I have a lot of number one players on their team on really bad teams. But overall, I thought it went okay. And I actually gave myself, let me check my notes real quick. I gave myself a B minus, actually. Just in terms of, I'm a little scared of my wide receiver depth. I had to take a lot of flyers at the end just to kind of keep up with that. And I was kind of upset about the George Kittle pick where I thought I should have went Waller. And, I'll probably change my opinion tomorrow about which one I have ranked higher.
Well, I'll be a little bit more charitable. I'll give you a B on this one. Cook is the obvious pick. I like Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the 3rd round. I think people have different opinions of him, but I think that in that offense, if he is the guy, and it sure looks like he will be as long as he's healthy, I mean, he could return 1st round value, and you got him in the beginning of the 3rd round. So I really like that. I agree. If you hit on a couple of these wide receivers that you're kind of taking in these middle rounds, or even a Devontae Parker late, if he regains some magic there with Tua, although it didn't look good for him with Tua last year. But, I've always been a Devontae Parker truther, and, I like that as a late round flyer. So if you get a couple of these mid-round, late-round wide receivers to hit, I think you'll be just fine. I think it's a B.
Okay, and going next to Jake Krieger, which is... what's his name now? Oh my gosh, I don't even know. Jake. Oh, Cumberland Crusaders.
Oh, okay.
Jake's
from
team.
Carlin. Jake, the guy that's north of the border up in PA. My buddy from college. Great team. He's a Packers fan, by the way. I'm trying to see if he's picked any Packers here. I don't know if he did this year. Do we have a Packer? No Packers. That's surprising. Jake has a great team. I really like it. I think it's balanced and beautiful. That would be what I would have to say here. He's got a really big strength, in my opinion, at the running back position, especially in light. And I would even say this before the injury that made James Robinson the unquestioned starter in Jacksonville. He's got Alvin Kamara at the top, obviously, a pretty easy pick there. Myles Gaskin, there's some questions about his workload in Miami, but he was phenomenal last year. He kind of sniped him from me. I really wanted him in the 5th, and he took him a pick before me. We had talked. He had Gaskin last year. We talked trade a couple times about him late in the season. So I know we both really liked him, and I had a feeling he was going to snipe me there. James Robinson, obviously, now he's picked as the number 3 running back on the team, but as Travis Etienne went down. Is that his name, Travis?
Yes.
Yep. Travis Etienne went down for the Jags. Robinson will be the unquestioned starter. So he's really picked in the 7th round here as a running back 3. He's going to be performing as probably the 2nd best running back on this team. So lots of flexibility there. And I also really like my favorite pick of the draft, actually, for this team was Xavier Jones in the 15th round.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The running back for the Rams, it got a little less sexy now that Sony Michel has signed on to the Rams. But and Adam, I think, as you know, last year, because you had a part of the triple-headed backfield of the Rams.
Yeah.
in any given week, one of those guys in that backfield could impress the coaches and come out and be the starter. You saw it last year. Devery Henderson flashed. A couple other guys they had there flashed. I don't know. I think Xavier. I think he's having a pretty good camp, Xavier Jones, and I think late in the season, if you're able to hold on to that depth later in the year, I think it might pay off, even if it's just for a week or two at the end of the season. I really like that pick. I would say my least favorite pick, just real quick, is DJ Chark in the 6th round. The Jaguars are looking to me like they're going to – every year they give you hope that they're going to kind of turn things around, but they're already having injury problems. They're already kind of having some internal strife, I think. It just doesn't feel very good. They've got a lot of weapons, but they don't seem to ever figure out how to use them. So picking Chark in the 6th round as your wide receiver 3 – maybe it'll pay off. I actually like some of the guys later, Brandon Cooks, Mooney with the Bears. I like some of those guys more than I like Chark. But overall, I think you've got enough depth there at wide receiver that it's not going to matter in the long run.
Oh, just circling back to DJ Chark. Let's do a little game here where we compare each players that were drafted after Chark and seeing which one you want more, Chark or that player, okay?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So Chark or Kenny Galladay, who was 6.5. Or no, that's actually before him. So it would actually be T. Higgins would be the wide receiver directly after.
Give me Higgins.
Okay. How about Chase Claypool, who's 7.5?
I'm not a big Claypool guy either. Same kind of thing. Lots of weapons in Pittsburgh and aging Roethlisberger. I will... Oh, boy. That's kind of a draw, but I'll take Chark on that one.
Okay. How about Chark or Juju Smith-Schuster? Same kind of thing in Pittsburgh.
Well, I actually like Smith-Schuster a little bit better. I think he's got more of a track record long-term with Roethlisberger. I kind of like that pick. You skip Michael Thomas. I really like that pick. I would take Michael Thomas.
I knew you were going to say something. I wanted to leave him to the end. I wanted to make it a little spicy.
But even to speed this up a little bit, I mean, Sutton, I would probably take Chark still. But Robbie Anderson at the end of the next round, I like Robbie Anderson better. He just got paid in Carolina. Deebo Samuel, I think I like him more in San Francisco. So I think there are a lot of guys that I personally would have taken over Chark there in the 6th round. But,
right. In the heat of the moment, you never know what you're thinking, what you're feeling. Okay, well, in terms of my analysis, obviously not obviously number 3. Could have won Derrick Henry. Ezekiel Elliott has been viewed on Hard Knocks. He's been looking great. But he goes with the safer pick, Alvin Kamara. I'm always a little wary of Kamara just because if Taysom Hill does become the starting quarterback there, you're losing a lot of red zone carries just because Taysom Hill's going to get his work in. That's like basically all he does. And you also have Latavius Murray still there, still vulturing touchdowns, still vulturing carries, especially if it's a blowout. He's going to be in the game. He's going to get his touches. So Alvin Kamara kind of scares me a little bit. And with your 1st round pick, you want to be as solid as possible. 3rd round, I love Darren Waller. Huge Darren Waller fan. He could be the number 1 tight end this year, and he could be the number 1 tight end week in and week out. He's just that talented. The other pick that kind of stood out to me was Matt Stafford in the 9th round. I love that pick. That's a great pick to me. Going to a new offense in LA, with McVay, the quarterback whisperer. He made Jared Goff look close to an MVP caliber player a couple years ago. I love that pick. I think he still has a lot left in the tank. He's gonna be in a balanced offense. He's not gonna be asked to do too much. I think that's a great starting quarterback to have, and for his team.
It's a good point, and it's a good pick, and it's an underrated pick. And I know you're a Stafford truther and have been for a long time, but I totally agree with you. The fact that he's going into a high-powered offense with the Rams, lots of weapons, finally getting out of Detroit where he hasn't really been good since, I guess, Calvin Johnson, he started to go downhill. I think he does have some stuff left in the tank. I also agree with you on Waller, and that was the other snipe, picking next to Jake. I would have taken Waller there in the 3rd round with the 4th pick. He went with the 3rd pick in that round to Jake. Yeah, great value. Probably my second ranked tight end above Kittle in this draft. Really, really good pick there, and solid to get him in the third round.
And what brings this whole draft together is just that now James Robinson is right back up there, just happenstance, because we didn't know how Travis Etienne was going to be used. Picking James Robinson in the 7th round. I mean, it's a no-brainer now, and it just benefits Jake even more. So what is your grade for Cumberland Crusaders?
Well, I started thinking about these grades even before the Etienne injury, and I had an A-, so I'm gonna stick there. But I think it's a really good team, well balanced. We didn't even talk about the wide receivers up at the top. Going in the 2nd round with Jefferson, the Vikings. Jefferson there had a great year last year, hoping to really had one of the best rookie wide receiver seasons of any rookie of all time. Really great year. Hopefully he can follow that up. Cousins slinging him the ball. DJ Moore in the 4th round. Like him, don't love him. But in a PPR format, he had a little bit rough year last year. He got better as the season went on. Makes me a little bit nervous in the 4th round, but if he's able to catch a lot of passes and become a target hog there in Carolina, it'll prove to be a decent pick. But I think A- for me.
So I was in between A- and B+. I'm going to go with B+, just because, the DJ Shark and Brandon Cooks, I'm not in love with. And any wide receiver after that is not really there. Anything to talk about really. The Alvin Kamara pick, probably would have went Henry there. Just because what you're going to get at Henry. There's a lot of variables in New Orleans now, just with Drew Brees retiring. How's the pass catching of Kamara going to be there? So I'm going to go with B+ on Jake. And now going to Mr. Wheelton himself, the Baltimore Bay Raiders.
Yeah.
Well, so how did you think that this draft went for you?
Well, again, I said at the top of the show, this was a strange draft. It was a throwback draft to running backs going early. And my big takeaway here is I kind of leaned into that. The fact that I was not going to subscribe to the running back run early in the draft. I was going to try to get my wide receivers while everyone else was kind of going down the charts on their running back. So getting Derrick Henry at the beginning, I would have, he was my 4th rated running back. The 3 that went before I did rate higher, would have taken Kamara there if he had fallen. It's a half-point PPR league. Henry is not really a pass-catching running back, but he is a bowling ball when it comes to the Titans offense. He can roll through anyone. So I'm happy to have him there. And then took wide receivers in the next 3 picks. Alvin Ridley, he fell to me in some mock drafts. I was happy to get him. A.J. Brown falling to me in the 3rd, that never happened in my mock drafts. Robert Woods falling to me in the 4th, that never happened to me in my mock draft. So I was really kind of pretty excited that I've got a core of 3 wide receivers in a half-point PPR league. That's definitely the strength of my team there. I rank all 3 of those guys in my top 20 at wide receiver. As I mentioned earlier, Irv Smith taking the tight end from the Vikings there in the 10th round. He's my first tight end. I'm going to struggle with that position. I'm used to it. I'm used to trying to find guys off the waiver wire. I'm used to targeting tight ends. Tight end, in my opinion, is one of those positions where you can luck into one that you pick up as your second tight end, and you all of a sudden have 2 amazing tight ends, and you can use one as trade bait. So I do try to target trades. So if anyone has that happen to them, I might be
we're not using this as your
my trade,
your trade platform here. Would you have taken Gesicki instead of Smith if they both got to you?
I don't know. I really don't care at that point, to be honest with you. I rank all those kind of lower end guys pretty much the same. But it is what it is. I'll deal with it. I'm happy with being able to get 3 high quality, high caliber wide receivers. And then, I obviously knew Dak Prescott actually fell. I was going to take a running back in the 5th, and Dak Prescott kind of fell to me. I think he's the end of a tier. I needed to take him. And then, to be able to get Mostert Michael Carter and Trey Sermon. Sermon is obviously kind of the backup to Mostert. Either one of those guys could take over that backfield in San Francisco. And Carter is potentially a starting running back for the Jets, although that has been called into question a little bit. But overall, pretty happy.
Okay, I would agree with you. I think you had a very solid draft. You love Derrick Henry, getting to you at 4. I mean, I had him ranked higher than Kamara, but that's just me. You gotta love Ridley getting to you. I'm actually kind of surprised that he actually fell that much. I had him falling into the 3rd round in some mock drafts that I was doing. In terms of A.J. Brown, that's where the question for me is. We don't really know how that system's going to work with Julio Jones now coming and a new offensive coordinator. It's just a lot of mouths to feed in Tennessee, and you got two of the 3 biggest ones. So I'm just a little afraid that in certain weeks when the Titans offense isn't going, that your team's going to struggle. In terms of running backs, I think you did the best that you could with waiting. Raheem Mostert, I'm a huge fan. I think he's actually going to take a step forward this year and really solidify himself as a top fantasy running back. And then you took a lot of flyers on Michael Carter, Sermon, Jamal Williams in Detroit. You're just hoping that he gets the goal line work and things of that nature. And in the 18th round, Le'Veon Bell, he hasn't even signed yet. And who knows how much tread he has left on the tires in that point. I'm going to say a pick that I thought was it was underrated just because of how late it was. Jacoby Myers, the second wide receiver in New England, maybe the first if you're not a believer in Nelson Aguilar. He's been flashing in the preseason, and I think he's actually a very solid pick for you. Another one I would say is Marvin Jones. I'm a huge fan of that pick as well. Just an overall solid team. Dak, Antonio Brown. Who knows how much of the offense he's going to be a part of in Tampa now that he has a full offseason to work with. Just a very solid overall team. So what grade did you give yourself? Try to be humble.
I'll try to be humble. I felt really good about leaning into the wide receiver position early. Some would call that the hero RB. That zero RB is not taking any running backs. Hero, that's the new thing, right? Hero RB. You pick a elite guy and then you wait a couple rounds. I'm pretty confident. I give myself a B+. I think.
Okay.
I think it was pretty good.
Well, actually, you have the highest grade from me out of all the teams. So I gave a to you. Just think that you have a lot of players that could single-handedly win you a week, and I think that's a very, very valuable thing to have when you can just have one player put up, a 30-point, performance in any given week. So yeah, you're definitely one of the teams that I need to watch out for.
So if any of you know how this works with Adam and I over the years. We are both strong believers in fantasy karma, so I don't put much credence into what he just said. I think that was a total karma play.
100% right, Pat.
Yeah,
100%
exactly.
Right. All right, well, going on to the number 5 pick in the draft was Westminster White Walkers, who, spoiler alert, there's going to be a name change because he says that the Game of Thrones reference is a little outdated, so just everyone be on the lookout for that there's going to be a new name in town at some point.
It's also racist. I think Black Walkers sounds good too.
I think so as well. What did you, pretty balanced. What did you, and also during draft night, he was extremely hyped about his team. He thought that he hit a home run. Do you feel the same way, Pat?
I thought you were going to say extremely high, but you said extremely hyped. I don't doubt either one of those. I have to say, this team has some risky propositions on it in my mind. Ezekiel Elliott, the reason he's going 5th as opposed to top 3, he's got some concerns with injuries and things that he's been dealing with over the last couple years, that he's fallen a couple spots. Hopkins is starting to get up there in age. Josh Jacobs, I don't feel like there's a whole lot of great energy around him. He could be great, but I feel like that Vegas team is a little bit unpredictable. I don't know that I don't love him. Mark Andrews seems like he's hit or miss. So I think there's just a lot of question marks on this team in my mind. I don't want to throw water on the fire, but that's just what I'm feeling here. He did go with a friendship strategy in terms of wide receivers. I'm sorry, no, he didn't. I'm thinking of another team here. But in terms of sort of a pick that I really like, Javonte Williams in the 6th round, I think if he's able to sort of take the lead in that Denver backfield, I think he could be a huge asset as the 3rd running back on this team. Having Elliott and Jacobs is a nice core. Having Williams there and Gus Edwards later, who knows, with the way the Ravens use running backs, if Gus Edwards lights it up for a couple games or if, God forbid, Dobbins goes down, Edwards is the guy by default. So I think there are some good pieces here. Again, Josh Jacobs in the 3rd round. I'm not a big Josh Jacobs fan at this point. But, waiting on Tannehill, waiting on quarterback is a fine strategy. He had a great year last year after a lot of mediocre years in Miami. Now with Tennessee, seems rejuvenated. It'll be really interesting. And I think Tannehill's performance this year, I think, is really going to be a huge thing for Scott's team. If he's great, this team will be really solid. If he kind of goes back to stinking it up, and if they have a couple, if Julio Jones has any injury concerns, or if Henry just proves to be the dominant force like we know he can be in that offense, I just worry a little bit about him. But overall, I think it's solid. I like a lot of the picks here. I just think there are some question marks.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat here. That I do think that there's a lot of question marks. Let's just go with the first, pick Ezekiel Elliott. I do think he's a huge bounce back candidate just because he's getting Dak back. I think he relies a lot on the backfield screens, catching the balls out of the backfield. I think that will really put up his fantasy value as opposed to last year. One of the biggest question marks I had is Josh Jacobs in the 3rd. I think I would have rather gone David Montgomery there. And I think
Agreed.
I might have even went Darrell Henderson over him at that point.
Agreed.
And this is before Sony Michel went to LA. We're gonna beat that with a dead like a dead horse. But Kendrick Drake now being there, that kind of scares me in terms of his usage. Is it going to be a 50-50? Is Kendrick Drake going to be the 3rd down back? With us going now to PPR, he might not get as many backfield looks in passing situations as he did in the past. That's just a big, that might be the biggest question mark in the draft surrounding a player. It's just what his usage is going to be in Las Vegas. Tight end, Mark Andrews. I had him last year. He's very, very touchdown dependent. He's not going to see a lot of balls week in and week out. As we know, the Ravens are one of the most run-heavy teams in the league. It's just there's going to be a lot of weeks where he's, having 2 catches for 16 yards and things of that nature. So you want to have him. It's kind of that weird tight end thing where it's, the top tier tight ends are gone. Kelsey, Kittle, Waller are gone. Where are you going to wait, or are you going to be, somewhere in the middle? I'm okay with that. I'm just saying don't expect too much. In terms of quarterback, Tannehill, not a huge fan. I would have been real impressive instead of going Landry at 8-8, he went Stafford there. Just kind of try to get it before that, because there was 2 rounds where no quarterbacks went. So I think I would have been a lot more impressed with that. Tannehill, he's not flashy, not sexy. He's not a sexy pick. But he goes with that, and then he goes to Trevor Lawrence. Who knows? That could be anything with that. I would say that the pick that that's most interesting to me, because it could turn out to be, a season saver, is Russell Gage, 15-5. He's now the number 2 in Atlanta. Without Julio Jones there, you got Calvin Ridley there. He's going to be taking all the number 1 corners. Is Russell Gage going to be the guy that comes out of nowhere, as there's one every year, And is a top 20, top 15 wide receiver just because of the amount of usage he's going to get in that Atlanta system that, as we know, has no defense. Is going to be behind in a lot of games. They're going to be throwing a lot. Just in terms of that, but
so I agree. I
ahead.
agree with you on Gage. Actually, I think it's a good point, and it makes me think. We were talking up Ridley here, but Ridley is Ridley because he was in the Ridley role at one point, and Gage is now in the Ridley role, and he's proven that Atlanta offense with Matt Ryan can sustain two wide receivers and can sustain it quite well. So I think that's a good point there on Gage, and I would actually step down 2 picks to the 17th round. Marlon Mack. People forget that a couple years ago, maybe Mack was going in the first couple rounds of these drafts because he was the guy in Indianapolis. Jonathan Taylor, kind of the new guy on the scene, the Cadillac kind of driving into town. But if an injury or if he has any of these second season struggles or a big injury, Marlon Mack could be back in a feature role, and he's still a young guy. I like that as a flyer pick, just to stash on the deep part of your bench and see if something happens.
And I do think that when you're in the last couple rounds, a lot of people are, eyes are closed and falling asleep kind of thing, where you want to look for players that if someone gets injured ahead of them, they can have an immediate impact, and they've had a track history of having an immediate impact, and that is Marlon Mack to a T. He's shown that he can be a top, pass catching running back in this league, and I think that was a great pick. So what final grade are we gonna give Barnett here?
Because of the aforementioned risks, even though it's a fairly solid team, I'm a little bit worried. I give it a C+.
Okay. I was close to you. I gave it a B. I love DeAndre Hopkins. I don't think he's lost a step. I just think there's no real weakness on this team. It's a very solid team. Maybe he doesn't have a superstar at any position. But I just think it's a solid team. So going on next to a new name team. Oh gosh, all these new names are throwing me for a loop.
This is Alex, right?
Yes, Alex, and he is. Oh gosh, what is his name? Oh, Owings Mills Oysters. Owings Mills Oysters.
Wow. Okay.
When we're looking at this board, obviously one thing, the first wide receiver off the board, Devonta Adams. What did you think about how the rest of this draft went?
Yeah, sort of the trend breaker here in flipping the switch and going with a wide receiver, the first wide receiver of the draft and the only receiver in the first 10 picks. Devonta Adams, obviously, you can't say enough about how great he is in Green Bay. So I really like, obviously going that direction there, starting your draft that way. And then following it up with Mixon and Montgomery, two running backs that, I think for where you get them in the second and third round, they're a good, solid core. So between the three of them, I think that's a great start to the draft. Really like getting Russell Wilson in the sixth round.
Oh, yes. I was going to mention that when it got to me.
Love it. Actually, don't, and I'm guessing, yeah. Okay. So from that comment, I'm guessing you would have taken Wilson over Brady if he had fallen to you. Yeah.
I think Russell Wilson has, the opportunity to be MVP winner this year, and anytime you get an MVP in the sixth round, you got to jump on it. So that was actually one of my favorite picks of the draft, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. It stood out to me for sure. He was on the board way too long, and it's a great value pick there. Really think you're strong at running back, as I mentioned. A little bit of a weakness to me at wide receiver. You get Devonta Adams, but then your next receiver pick is not until the seventh round.
And it's Michael Thomas, who's going to be out for 3 months.
Who's going to be out. And then, you've got Jalen Waddle, you've got Mike Williams, you've got Marquise Brown, some guys on some offenses that are not particularly wide receiver first offenses in any of those situations. So I'm really concerned about the wide receiver depth on this team. The pick that I really didn't like here is Kyle Pitts, the tight end for Atlanta, the rookie in the fourth round. I think there's a long track record of rookie tight ends, and he could be the one that makes me eat my words, but rookie tight ends just do not perform for fantasy purposes or otherwise. How many times in the last couple of years even have you seen, highly ranked tight ends come out in the first 10, 20 picks of the draft and just not quite live up to expectations in the first season, or some of them never. So I will see about Kyle Pitts. I think he's in an offense that is probably designed to use tight ends, but I'm concerned about spending a 4th-round pick there, especially when there were so many good wide receivers left on the board.
Yeah, let me circle back to that, because I think that this is important in terms of, who are the tight ends going on after him? T.J. Hawkinson, we got Tanya, we got Noah Fant. I'm okay with taking the risks here just because of what he could become. I mean, the rave reviews out of preseason, he's a big, solid, really fast tight end. And how valuable is it to have a top tier tight end in fantasy football? He's taken a big risk, as you say. Rookie tight ends, you're never sure. He could be out of the top 15 for all we know. But I guess this is kind of where we disagree a little bit. I'm okay with taking the risk there, but I can see that there is an overwhelming risk of taking a tight end that's never taken an NFL snap in the 4th round.
Yeah, I mean, I think the track, just looking back on how this evolves over time, rookie tight ends are just huge, risky. You say top tier, but rookie tight ends are always sexy expert picks. I think by the end of the year, you might see him closer to 15 than you would see him at 5. So, but we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. Again, I think he's in a good offense to succeed. But you mentioned Gage is there. You mentioned Calvin Ridley, how much we both love both of those guys. Is there a third major mouth to feed? We'll have to see.
Okay, well, in terms of Alex's draft, Devonta Adams had no problem with that. Joe Mixon, gosh, I had him last year, so I'm going to eat my words on that. He's kind of in a weird situation there, because you can't wait any longer for another running back on the turnaround. So I'm okay with that pick. Michael Thomas in the 7th round. He's on the PUP. He, as we know, in the past, he's been a number 1 wide receiver. It's just, can he get back fast enough where it matters for Alex's team? Is he still going to be in it just because he took him in the 7th round? Is his team still going to be in it where it's going to matter? That's a big question mark. Trey Lance, you're in 16, you're just taking a flyer on a guy. I'm okay with that just because you have Russell Wilson, David Montgomery. It's a lot of just solid. I wouldn't say it's a lot of home run hits in terms of his draft. Marquise Brown, Mike Williams, Waddle. You don't really know what Waddle's going to do. Mike Williams is second fiddle to Keenan Allen, and Marquise Brown's on a team that doesn't throw the ball. So I think it's solid, maybe less than solid, but he doesn't really, other than Devonta Adams, he doesn't really have that home run hitter for each out of every week. So I'll give my grade first. I gave him a B minus. For this, just because of the questions around that middle of the round wide receivers. How much work are they going to get? Yeah, that's the grade I had.
Yeah, I gave him a B, and one of the other things I would just mention here are a couple of really savvy picks in the 12th and 13th round. He's already got 3 solid running backs early in the draft. The next 2 that he took, the 4th running back and 5th running back for his team, Tony Pollard with the Cowboys in the 12th round, and Chuba Hubbard in Carolina. Both of those guys, they're behind their respective starters on those teams. But if Ezekiel Elliott goes down, which he has, Pollard is launched into a RB1 week in and week out. Chuba Hubbard, same thing. We saw it last year with Christian McCaffrey going down. Mike Davis became the guy. He became an extremely valuable commodity for Josh, who made the playoffs, I believe, on the strength of having that handcuff last year for McCaffrey. So I think those are 2 savvy picks that, who knows, if one of those guys hits and he's already got 3 solid running backs, one of those guys could be trade bait to bring in a really great wide receiver.
Okay, let's move on right on ahead. Josh Hughes. Is this his second year or third year? I think it's his second year, right?
Yeah, second year, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so pretty standard actually. Just going with the running back, Jonathan Taylor. Great running back. Going running back, wide receiver, then quarterback. Um, what are your thoughts on how his draft played out?
Yeah, I mean, this is a standard way that I would typically like to build a team. Just sprinkling in a little bit of all the top positions: quarterback, running back, wide receiver in the first 7 rounds, taking a tight end late. First off the board with Justin Tucker in the 11th round. That's always questionable strategy, but we all love us some Justin Tucker, so might give him a pass on that one. I think it's a solid team. The biggest strength to me, obviously, is the running back. Having Jonathan Taylor in the first round with the Colts, following that up with Darrell Henderson, who you and I both talked up earlier and said he could have probably gone in the third round if we would have been there to pick him. Getting him in the fourth round, I think, is a nice value there. I would say that the weaknesses on this team, to me, wide receiver a little bit, kind of went with an interesting strategy, took Metcalf in the second round, which is a great pick. The next 2 wide receivers, number 2 and 3 on this team, Devonta Johnson, and then 2 rounds later in the 7th round, Juju Smith-Schuster.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the friendship strategy coming into play there, hoping one of those guys is the guy, but I think there's a very good chance that you could be in a position of having to pick your wide receiver 2 and make the wrong pick and decision on those guys week in and week out. I mean, we are a 3 wide receiver league, so your next up would be T.Y. Hilton. So I think there's a little bit of, a lot of lack of depth from that position. But overall, I mean, I think it's a solid team. Gronkowski, I don't know, as the tight end on this team, what that's going to do. Ertz in the 15th round, with Dallas Goedert there, it's, again, hard to predict which week one of those guys is going to go off.
Right.
So I think there are some decent picks here. The running backs are strong. Like I said, Josh Allen having, the second picked quarterback in the draft. Maybe is he the number 2 or is he 3 or 4? People can quibble about that, but overall, I think he's a good pick to have there in the 3rd round, and I like it.
Okay. I'm going to take a different approach. I wasn't a huge fan of this draft. Jonathan Taylor, obviously, at 6, no issue with that whatsoever. I do have a little bit of issue with the Metcalf pick. I would, I would rather have Hopkins, Ridley, maybe even Justin Jefferson over Metcalf, and they went a couple picks later in the 2nd round. Um, in the 5th round, Devonte Johnson. I am not a big fan of that pick at all. They already had Chase Claypool there. They already had Juju Smith-Schuster there, who they're already talking about, who Josh already picked in the 7th round. He picks Johnson in the 5th. I think there's a lot of hype behind that pick. Brandon Ayuk. Would you rather have him? DJ Shark. I don't know. Kenny Galladay going around later. I'd rather have Galladay than Johnson. Johnson just scares me. He seems like a one-trick pony. He's 5'10". He's a speedster. Can Roethlisberger get the ball down the field? With any consistency with him, he's a home run hitter. So wasn't a big fan of that pick. Not a big fan of Justin Tucker in 11. That at the 11th round, yes, he's the best kicker in the universe, but we gotta build these teams out, and you can always get a kicker. I would have loved to see him take Nakeem Hardman in the 11th round. He just went a couple of picks later. I think that really would have solidified his options at wide receiver and really got rid of a lot of deficiencies that he did have or does have at the wide receiver position. Sami Watkins in the 18th. It's just a flyer. We know what we're getting with him. Josh Allen, top 3 probably quarterback. I'm okay with that. It's just in these middle rounds, Johnson, Jones at running back. There's a lot of people in Tampa Bay that are going to be vying for carries. So not a huge fan of this draft, and because of that, I actually gave him a C plus in terms of what I thought with this draft.
Yeah, you've convinced me a little bit. The more I stare at this team, I will say this: there is some legitimacy to having the best kicker in football and the best defense, potentially the best defense, the highest ranked defense, the Rams in the 10th round and Tucker in the 11th. It's obviously not, ideal to pick a kicker that early, but there's something to be said, and we've changed some of the settings around in terms of scoring for defenses and kickers. So maybe that is helpful, but it is nice to be able to stick a team like the Rams into your DST position and have them, set it and forget it. Exactly. I originally had this at a B minus. I kind of am feeling a little bit more like you are in terms of the wide receiver depth. So I think I agree with C plus. I think I'll settle there.
Okay. Great. We're going on to now a rookie in the Beltway Wars Invitational. First year owner Michael Kranz, who got a warm welcome this week when Travis Etienne is now out for the year with the dreaded Liz Frank foot injury. So his 5th round pick before even snap of football is played is out for the year. Patrick, does he have enough depth at the running back position to really make up for that?
No, he absolutely doesn't. And you remember the 1st round pick Saquon Barkley here. Could be a steal at that value, but also coming off of a major injury that's also a risk there to some degree. It's absolutely a running back black hole, but I would say that I think he was able to, despite the ETN injury, salvage this draft to some degree. I think the first 3 picks are really impressive. Barkley, if he stays healthy, Stephon Diggs in the 2nd. He's the 3rd wide receiver. Again, going back to what I was saying earlier about if the running backs are go a different direction, lean into the way the draft is going. So
and
going
how
with
the board
Diggs,
is shaping up.
Absolutely. So Diggs in the 2nd, fine, very, very good pick there. Keenan Allen in the 3rd round, love that pick. Thought about going with him in the 3rd round, 5 picks earlier. Think that he could really be great. He's been great there for a long time. He sort of flies under the radar sometimes, but he is a catch monster. He's really productive in the red zone. I really like Keenan Allen in the 3rd. You follow that up with Lamar Jackson. We're all hoping, or at least most of us in this league, that he's going to continue to develop and become a dual threat kind of quarterback. That he's already one of the stars in the NFL at the quarterback position, so he could very well keep improving. I mentioned Keenan Allen as a pick I really like. I would also say Devonta Smith in the 8th round, chance to be the number 1 wide receiver on an Eagles team that is really trying to come up with a new identity. They've got a new quarterback there. They've got a new lead wide receiver. Nelson Aguilar is gone. Some of the other guys that they've had kicking around for a bunch of years is gone at the wide receiver position. So I really like Devonta Smith, in that role. I think it's a solid team. I think it, again, despite the running back depth, if you look at everything else, Noah Fant, one of those kind of mid-round tight ends, we'll see how he does in now that he's assuming potentially a bigger role in Denver. I think there's enough here. It's going to put the rookie Mike to the test in terms of trying to build depth through free agency or trades, finding out how to fill these holes. You've got to start 2 running backs every week. And we'll see.
Yeah, I agree basically with everything you said. This is I bookmarked this as one of the teams that can least afford an injury at really any position. I would say that the depth is very short. I would say, Saquon Barkley, 8th pick, you got to take him there. The upside's too much. He can be a top 3 pick if he shows that he's healthy. I'm perfectly okay with going Diggs in the 2nd. And like you said before, Keenan Allen in the 3rd, that's an absolute steal. the one pick that I liked that was later in the rounds, was Will Fuller in the 10th. I think he has a great opportunity in Miami to carve out the deep threat position in Miami for Tua. Um, I think that he's shown in Houston that he can be very reliable, has great hands. He is suspended for the first game of the season. That probably did affect his draft stock just a tiny bit. But in the 10th round, getting a maybe number one wide receiver for a team is great value. And that's what all drafting is about, is what value can you get where. Also in the 18th round, Tariq Cohen, I'm perfectly okay with that. Stash him on the pup list. And then he comes back. He's the pass catching running back for the Bears. Maybe Justin Fields is starting by then. He'd be the perfect outlet for Fields. When he gets in trouble and he can't run with the ball. In terms of tight end, Noah Fant. He was promising last year. I think he ended with a season-ending injury later in the year. Perfectly okay with that. Overall, very solid team. Before the Travis Etienne, injury, I had the grade much higher. That obviously, kind of sinks his grade just because of how much that hurts in the 5th round. Just you're losing an entire pick. So what did you think in terms of grades with Mike?
For the draft itself, I had him at a B for it. ETN going down obviously is a huge loss, but just going by the draft itself, I think it's a solid B, a good start for Mike.
Yep, and we're exact same consensus. I had him as a B as well. And just so anyone listening, we did not go over the grades beforehand. So anytime that you see the same grades, we did not go over what our grades were going to be. So it just shows that we have a pretty good consensus of the teams here.
It shows that we've just known each other for
well, that's a good point as well.
Too long.
Okay, so going to from a rookie to one of the most veteran players in the Beltway Wars Invitational, Dustin Summers.
An OG.
I think Dustin had one of the most interesting draft nights that I could imagine. Is he in Hawaii? Was he in Hawaii during this vacation, or was he just thinking about it? Because I think he was off in dreamland thinking about Hawaii when he was making some of these picks.
He might have been, and he's there right now. But this is the throw a dart team to me. If I had to kind of pin it down to something, he's got a lot of dart throws on here that could work out, but maybe they won't. Big weakness. We've talked about it a couple times, and it's interesting in a draft where all these running backs went early. I feel like we're talking about a lot of wide receiver core issues with some of these teams, and I think this is one of them. Took Terry McLaurin in the 3rd round. Nice pick, fine pick there, but then waited a couple rounds to go with your wide receiver too. Remember, we start 3 wide receivers, and you could start a 4th in the flex spot. So to take your 2nd wide receiver in the 6th round is risky. Jamar Chase, we talked about it earlier with Cincinnati. Lots of competition for targets there. The rookie, we'll see how he does. Taking dart throws on 2 Denver wide receivers, Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. Again, similar situation. Might not know who's going to pop off on any given day. Laviska Shenault, lots of talent, was a big hype train last year in Jacksonville in the 9th round, but just no guys that really stand out. Actually, all those guys I just named, my favorite value pick of those 4 is actually, well, of those 5 is Curtis Samuel in the 12th round. He could be special in Washington. I really like him. He flashed a little bit in Carolina. He proved that he can kind of be a flexible player in how he's used. And if Washington can figure out how to use him in that offense, I like Curtis Samuel as a 12th round pick. The other kind of obvious weakness here, waiting on quarterback, waiting until the 13th round. Yeah, really waiting. Baker Mayfield. We joke with Dustin about taking Joe Flacco early at one point. He might have been just as good taking Flacco at that point. I mean, he's got Mayfield and Tua in back-to-back picks. both on teams that, we'll see how they do. We'll see if
And then,
Cleveland takes the lead. But
why not just throw in Ryan Fitzpatrick in the 17th, just to,
at the end,
throw a
yeah.
wrench into things.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
yeah.
I kind of have the same thing. First two picks, I'm completely okay with. Nick Chubb, stud. Travis
Yeah.
Kelce, the best at his position. Terry McLaurin. Um, Not sure. He has all the talent in the world. How good is that Washington offense going to be? Um, Allen Robinson, may I've wanted him before that. That's probably even. Mike Evans, I don't know. Might want Mike Evans instead of him. Might want Amari Cooper ahead of him. That might be going a little too far. Um, but in terms of your next two picks, Swift and Davis to a new team. He's older. How is that going to affect things? We don't know how the offense is going to run. Their offensive coordinator was in Tennessee, so maybe they're going to go to a more run base. Who knows? Did Swift really carve out enough to be the starter in Detroit to hold it on for the entire season? Just again, a lot of dart throws. My biggest question, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Dustin's probably screaming at us that we're a couple minutes into evaluating his team, and did not mention, and unfairly so, that we haven't mentioned he's got Travis Kelce, the dominant tight end, the premier tight end, and has been for several years in the second round, first tight end off the board, third non-running back off the board. I mean, just curious, your thoughts, Adam. Travis Kelce there, pick 2.4. How do you feel about him there?
Oh, I'm completely fine with that there. Like we've been saying, and with prior team analysis, get the best player at the position. I mean, you can't really go wrong with that. I've ended up on a lot of teams with Travis Kelce. He's a great addition. Patrick Mahomes is always looking for him in the red zone. No problem with that pick there. Big issue I have is these three quarterbacks. He's going to be kicking himself every week because he's going to pick the wrong one more times out of not than not. And three quarterbacks, that's a lot of analysis you have to do to try to figure out which one you want to start. I hate the David Johnson pick at around 11. I know that he was falling in the draft room and the draft board. I think Sleeper had him ranked way too high. And Jamar Chase in the 6th round. He's been struggling in training camp. He's had a lot of drops in preseason. We're not really sure, how involved early in the season he's going to be. Maybe he's waiting for the long play where he gets more involved, he gets more comfortable in the offense, and then he becomes a better player. But is Dustin's team going to be around that long to really seek the benefits of that? I'm not really sure. I mean, there's a ton of question marks on this team. And, I just don't know how, where he's going to get his production week in and week out. Kelsey's going to produce. Even Nick Chubb, how much, is he going to give up to Kareem Hunt? That's always been a sticking point with him. I'm just not a huge fan of this draft. And I think that we could be looking at one of the teams that struggles the most this year.
I agree to an extent. I gave it a C. Again, dart throws on this team. There could be some guys that surprise us, but I think your point about Chubb and having Kareem Hunt still in the mix. I mean, Hunt was taken with a 5th round pick in this draft, so we'll see how that works out. Kelce, obviously, having that weapon goes a long way in helping this team, especially in a half-point PPR league. Kelsey's a guy that can go out and catch 10 balls a game. I've never had Kelce on any fantasy team ever because he goes so early. I don't know. I gave it a C.
And I gave Dustin the worst grade he's ever received in his life, probably a C-. Just not. I just don't know where that week in and week out production is going to come from. And I think that there's a lot of people on this roster where, just like we've been saying the entire time, that they're just dart throws. And, you want some stability in your early rounds. Moving on to the 10th pick is Brian Morgan, now in his sophomore year of the Beltway Wars Invitational. Last year, he had a pretty solid year. I felt like at the beginning he had I think he went undefeated like the first 5 weeks, but then kind of fell off near the end. Um, going running back, that's, a staple in fantasy football drafts. Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler. What did you think about those two picks?
Yeah, it's a tried and true traditional build of a fantasy football team. As you said, going running back to begin. And, by the end of the the seventh round, you've locked up your starters. You've got 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, a quarterback, and a tight end. So it's a traditional build, and it worked out really well from the 10th pick. Jones and Eckler, solid team there. Love the Eckler pick. There's a lot of hype around him. He's proven that he can be a workhorse type of guy, can catch some passes. He's a versatile back. Allen Robinson, CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb, to me, was a guy that I specifically remember in this draft as we were going, looking at my personal draft board saying, how is this guy still available, in the 4th round? You've got guys like Mike Evans going before him. You've got Terry McLaurin, some guys that we talked about earlier that maybe went a couple picks too early. CeeDee Lamb is a guy that sat on that board for a long, long time. He's in the 4th round. He could be the guy in Dallas. There's a lot of hype around him. He could very well turn out to be a great pick there in the 4th round. Really like the pick of Austin Dillon in the 9th round. He's the backup to
A.J. Dillon. Let's give him some credit.
Sorry, yes, A.J. Dillon. Austin Dillon is a NASCAR driver, but anyway, that he's ninth round, but as the handcuff to Aaron Jones in Green Bay, so he's got the handcuff to Aaron Jones, which I would argue there, every year it seems like there are very fewer and fewer running backs where owning the handcuff is really valuable. I think this is one of those situations. It's been true of Aaron Jones in the past and Green Bay running backs that have come before him. I like having the handcuff in that situation. I thought it was a savvy pick. Another, again, going back to picking a kicker early, Tyler Bass, Buffalo, 12th round, early for a kicker, some better talent to potentially load up on there. The Ravens defense, having them in the 10th round, it's early, but again, it's another team that you're just going to be able to put out there most weeks and not have to worry about it. Odell Beckham, 6th round, lots of potential there he's a candidate for a comeback player. I think a little less likely than some of the other comeback players we've been talking about, but we'll see how it goes. I think overall, solid team.
I would agree with a lot of that. Aaron Jones, obviously stud. Austin Eckler, if he can stay healthy, he's a smaller back. He gets hit a lot. He kind of breaks down. His biggest thing is just injuries. He's a stud if he can stay healthy. CeeDee Lamb, a lot of mouths to feed in Dallas, as we've discussed before. Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper. You got Michael Gallup. You got a lot of people there, but Dallas is going to be behind a lot. They're going to be in a lot of high-scoring games. There's plenty enough targets for CeeDee Lamb. One of the picks I really like is Justin Herbert, round 5. Came on last year as a rookie, looked great. He's surrounded by a ton of weapons in L.A. Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. As the mentioned Austin Eckler. Also a bad defense, so they're going to be throwing a lot. I really do actually like that pick a lot. If we're going to go down, Dallas Goedert. That's a question mark to me. As we're getting lower and lower in terms of tight ends, I know that the pickings are slim. I probably would have went Gronkowski before him. But once you get down there, you're just kind of throwing darts, as we've been saying. Pick I really, really like is N'Keal Hardman. I've already mentioned him once before. He's probably going to be the number 2 in Kansas City. A team that's going to be throwing, 40, 50 times a week just with Patrick Mahomes. In the 11th round, there's no better value than that. Speedster on the outside. Mahomes is not going to have a problem getting him the ball. Just because you mentioned him, Tyler Bass, I hate that pick. My tried and true strategy with picking kickers is you want a kicker who, is going to be one of your last picks, which is fine. He's also in Buffalo, which has horrible weather. It's going to be snowing, rainy, windy, all this stuff. He's outdoors. all the things that I do not look for in a kicker, Tyler Bass is. Now, he's been pretty good. He's going to be on a high-powered offense, so he's going to get a lot of opportunities. But, I any bad weather game, he's going to have a lot of misses, and could have a lot of misses, and that could really tank, a week for Brian, and 1 week is all it takes to miss the playoffs.
Yeah, that's a fair point about the weather. You pick before him Young Hoku in Atlanta, the opposite situation where he's in a dome. He's going to be playing in great weather every time he's home. But yeah, Buffalo, half your games in that weather could be a problem. But totally agree on McCole Hardman. I mean, that he's flashed before. Kansas City has proven to be an offense that shows that they can reward guys who come up and make impact plays. I trust Andy Reid to get him the ball if he's turning out to be the hot hand.
Right.
I do like that pick too. I agree.
So he's actually a name change, and he did Timonium Tallywhackers actually.
Okay. Right.
And I actually gave him an A. Actually, I do. The first 6 picks, home runs, I think. Jones, Eckler, Robinson, Lamb, Herbert, Beckham. I think that's a very, very solid core, and I think that's going to get him a lot, pretty far. So I'm a big fan of his draft.
I agree, especially if Odell Beckham turns out to be a guy, more than a guy. If he turns out to be the guy in Cleveland and gets back to any semblance of what he used to be, this is going to be a dangerous team that you don't want to play. I give it an A-. I'm with you.
Awesome. Okay, going on to the second to last pick of the first round is another new name, Pasadena Spreadnecks. Okay, ran by Sarah Hughes, who is used to be the rookie, now is a solid veteran with the Beltway Wars Invitational. Went wide receiver first round, perfectly okay with that. Second wide receiver off the board. What did you think about, going Tyreek Hill there at 11?
A lot of years I really like picking at the back end of drafts. This is not one of those years, so I don't envy any of these folks at the back, Sarah and Tom, especially at 11 and 12. To me, after Jones went in the round before, I feel like there's a bit of a drop-off here. Tyreek Hill, obviously, he's an electric player. He's gotten into some trouble. He's kind of a little bit more injury prone just based on his stature. He's a small guy. He's a fast guy.
He's a Lamborghini basically. Anything can break.
He is, yeah. And if you crash your Lamborghini, you're in big trouble. So it's a little bit risky there. I thought Dobbins in the second round was a to me a really surprising pick.
Yep,
that I just.
That's what I had as one of the. I have it in my notes here. One of the biggest reaches of the draft.
Yeah, it was really early. I mean,
so let's stop there at Dobbins. We're gonna play our game again.
Yeah.
Just with running backs after who you'd rather have other than Dobbins. Okay, so Dobbins, okay. Eckler.
Yeah, give me Eckler.
Dobbins, Mixon. Dobbins, Carson. Yep. Dobbins, Edwards-Helaire.
Give me Cam Edwards-Helaire, yeah.
And then Dobbins, Josh Jacobs.
Give me Jacobs. Give me Montgomery.
Wow.
I would say that I would stop it after Montgomery. So I would say, at least a round too early.
I would have stopped it before. I had Clyde Edwards-Helaire and J.K. Dobbins around the same. Because usually the mock drafts I did, I usually got to them and picking between those two. That's where I had a decision to make. But I thought that was entirely right too early. I'm with you. I would have rather had Eckler. I probably would have rather had Mixon. Definitely would have rather had Carson before Dobbins. Just because with Dobbins, you also have to deal with Gus Edwards. You don't know how much usage he's going to get. And also, not to cut you off, but in terms of just one last thing on Dobbins, he's not going to get a lot of throws out of the backfield. Lamar Jackson is a scrambling quarterback. If he sees a hole, he's going to take it. He's not going to throw it to the running back. So you're not going to get a lot of usage of screens or design throws out of the backfield with Lamar Jackson, which is really going to hurt J.K. Dobbins' value.
Yeah, agreed. I just think the last time that the Ravens really truly had a star stud running back in the NFL, I think you're going back to Ray Rice. You know, they
Yep.
had a couple guys that had great seasons, but in terms of a guy worth a second round pick, I think it's a little early. But, I'm hoping, we're all hoping, except for Sarah. Well, I guess she's
Well,
rooting for fantasy purposes, but being a Washington football team fan, it's a mouthful. I wish they would just pick a damn name already. But regardless, I also think that the depth behind him is a little suspect. Miles Sanders, you're seeing reports now. I think just today, someone in our league picked up Boston Scott behind him because there's a report about Sanders might not be the lead guy or maybe in a timeshare situation. So him going in the fourth round, a little bit suspect there. So I think there's a little bit of lack of depth on this team. I think everyone in here can be a starter. Hill, Dobbins, Sanders, Brandon Ayuk filling the number 2 role. He could surprise some people. I love Robbie Anderson in the 7th round. I thought that was a great pick. I'm a big Robbie Anderson believer. He's a Temple U guy, so represent. Playing with Matt Rule, another Temple guy in that Carolina offense that seems a little bit promising to me. I would say that my favorite pick in this draft, and I know Adam, you pay attention to this stuff as well, but Marquez Callaway, and I actually had this written down before he blew up again in a preseason game the other night. New Orleans is looking for guys. Their team has been consistent in terms of their offensive strategy over the last decade with Drew Brees at the helm. Now turning to try to find out different guys to get involved, different ways to be successful with a new quarterback. Yeah. Callaway has absolutely shined in his first couple preseason games. To get him in the 15th round, I think he's going to hit the starting lineup. Could frankly, depending on how the depth charts come out, he could be a first round starter for this team. I really like him.
Yeah, I do agree. Tyreek Hill, I'm completely fine with that at 11, just because of how much talent and how much running back talent went off the board. J.K. Dobbins, I think that's way too early to draft him. I think there's 3 or 4 more better running backs to pick there. My favorite pick of Sarah's was probably quarterback Kyler Murray. I think that he has a chance to be the number 1 overall quarterback this year, just in terms of his running and throwing. You're never gonna get a stinker of a week out of him. He's gonna save his bad games with his legs, and he has all the weapons in the world. He has D-Hop, and he has AJ Green there now, and Rondale Moore has been getting rave reviews out of training camp. Logan Thomas and Evan Ingram as tight ends. When you're getting into that 8th, 9th, 10th round trying to look for tight ends, I'm completely okay with that. Big question marks, Dobbins, and I would say Chase Edmonds. You're not really sure what the role is going to be there with James Conner be there. They paid James Conner for a reason. If they thought Chase Edmonds was the guy, they probably wouldn't have signed, James Conner to such a big deal. Overall, solid. A lot of question marks. I'm not as sold on Brandon Ayuk as you are, just in terms of that offense. I think they're going to be running the ball a lot. I think that if the Patriots would get away from Cam Newton and start Mac Jones, I think James White in the 18th round does have some value. It's just, with Cam Newton, it's kind of the same thing with Lamar Jackson, where he's not really throwing to the backfield, running back that much. So what grade do you think?
I don't love this team.
Okay.
I don't love this team very much. I think the running back is going to be a problem. Part of it is I had Miles Sanders last year, and he did not turn out to be that great. Dobbins, we've talked about. I'm kind of feeling this is like D+ C- territory.
Oof.
I'm not a fan. Maybe if there was a better tight end thrown in here that I could get a little bit more excited about, but I don't see anyone on this team aside from Tyreek Hill. Kyler Murray, yeah, I'm not as big of a Kyler Murray guy. Tyreek Hill can be a superstar and is a superstar, but he comes with some question marks to me. So I don't see anyone that I'm really, really excited about on this team.
Okay. Well, I'm a little more. I had him at a B minus, just because I do like Hill, Murray. I think that's going to win her some weeks just on their talent alone. Um, and I think that the Robbie Anderson, I think he's going to be fine. Marcus Callaway, I think she's going to be okay. But then again, there's just a lot of question marks that we don't have answers to right now.
Yeah, so that's probably our biggest difference here so
Yeah.
far. Yep.
Okay. And the last and certainly not least, Tom Fitzhugh. What is his name now? Finksburg Fiends. Um, Again with the double running backs, Najee Harris and then Antonio Gibson. 1-2. Are you a believer in Najee Harris?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. I wince whenever I see rookie running backs go in a first round. I get it. You're kind of forced into that pick, just picking on that potential alone. But it's a question mark to me. Same, and that's kind of my theme for this team. I think 5 years ago this team would have been really good, and I'm specifically referring to the top two wide receivers, Mike Evans and Julio Jones, and Aaron Rodgers in the 6th round. I think that, hey, if those guys become what they were 5 years ago, or in some cases not quite that long ago, but it just makes me a little bit nervous that 3 of the top 6 picks there are getting older, are not really the number one guys in terms of Evans and Jones on their team anymore. Might have weeks where they have huge weeks. We've seen it, but we've also seen a track record of a couple years where Evans and Jones are not the guys that they used to be in their respective offenses. Lots of mouths to feed in both of those teams. So that really concerns me. Harris, again, I mentioned he's a rookie. That scares me a little bit, putting so much pressure on him to perform in an RB1 position there. Antonio Gibson, we'll see how that Washington offense looks. He was a flash. He flashed in a huge way last year. We'll see if he can keep that momentum up. I have my doubts on him to start the 2nd round. So, yeah, I think that 5 years ago I would have really, really loved this team, but I don't really like this team too much in 2021.
Gotcha. I do not agree. I think Najee Harris. I am a believer. I think he's going to be the workhorse in Pittsburgh. I think that he's probably the best running back they've had since Jerome Bettis. Probably. I think he's gonna get the rock early and often, especially with Ben Roethlisberger getting up there in age. I think that Mike Tomlin wants to get back to that smash mouth Steelers football. I think he's gonna get out of all the 1st round draft pick running backs. I think he's probably gonna get the ball the most, just because of how he doesn't have anybody behind him competing for carries. In terms of Evans and Jones, I'm okay with the Gibson pick. Evans and Jones, there's just so much questions about what role Julio Jones is going to have in this new offense. Are they going to go more pass heavy now just because they have Julio Jones? Is AJ Brown going to take targets away from him? I'm sure, because he's very talented.
Could we pause there and just play the game and
Sure.
and I'll host this time, because
Sure.
Julio Jones to me was a big reach in that pick. So the beginning of the 4th round, wide receivers that went after him: CeeDee Lamb.
I would rather have Jones.
Okay, Robert Woods.
That's a great question. See, I don't like the. I think I'd rather have Woods.
Okay, DJ Moore.
Jones.
Amari Cooper.
Cooper.
Chris Godwin.
Jones.
Cup and Lockett.
I would rather have Jones over both of them.
Okay, so you feel a little bit better about him. I think I would
Yeah,
take.
just the track record. I know it's just that big question mark. He's going to a new squad. Don't really know how he's going to be used, but I think the talent is still there. I think he does want to prove that he didn't wasn't just a product of Matt Ryan throwing him throwing him jump balls all the time. I think he wants to go to a winner. Tennessee definitely has a winner on the field this year. Definitely going to be a high-powered offense. Um, I just think it's kind of risky just because there's so many unknowns. I haven't really
Mhm.
even heard anything out of camp in regards to Julio Jones, if he's acclimated well or not.
Mhm.
In terms of the rest of the draft, I love the Aaron Rodgers pick at round 6. The MVP of he was the MVP the MVP last year. Going in the 6th round, I definitely would have taken him in that round. I ended up with Brady. Um, if you're talking about defenses, there's not a better one than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Shaq Griffin and Jason Pierre-Paul off the edges. They're going to get a lot of sacks for that team, which is going to equal a lot of points. Uh, I don't really like the Rashad Bateman pick in round 14, but it's round 14. You just take flyers where you can get them. And I don't like taking up the 2 quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson, Derek Carr. You have Aaron Rodgers. You're not going to be starting them over Aaron Rodgers. Get one of the flyer quarterbacks at the end of the draft. Don't draft, 2 when you can throw flyers at other positions that you might need. Those positions being, wide receiver. Since you're going to be starting Deebo Samuel or Henry Ruggs as your 3rd receiver each and every week, you probably want a little more diversity when it comes to who you can choose for the later rounds. And you don't want to be the guy that could have picked somebody. They blow up week 1, and then you're at the end of the waiver order where you can't get them when you wanted.
Yep. And before we grade, the only other couple things I would say, a pick that I really liked in the 12th round, Elijah Moore, the rookie for the Jets. You talked about Corey Davis early on. I think it's a mystery. He's new to the Jets. Elijah Moore is new to the Jets. They're really trying to reconfigure how they do things there in New York. So in my mind, Elijah Moore, he's flashed a couple times in camp. I think there's almost as good of a shot that he becomes the guy instead of Corey Davis there with the Jets. So to get him in the 12th round is a nice pick late in the draft. And then back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, the Buccaneers defense in the 10th and Harrison Butker in the 11th as the second kicker taken. Just early for me to be getting those kind of guys. But
yeah, I mean, Harrison Butker is probably 1A in terms of kickers behind Justin Tucker. High-powered offense, he's going to get a ton of opportunities. So, that's not my forte. Also Kansas City, bad weather, but he seems to thrive in bad weather. So I gave this team. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say you'd think so, but I was looking up his stats earlier. He was the 14th ranked kicker last year.
Oh wow!
And only went into double figures in standard scoring 4 times. I think that's probably a little bit of a part of just being on such an explosive offense that's so efficient in the red zone. He's kicking a lot of extra points, not really using him a whole lot on that side of the football field.
Gotcha. All right. So the grade I have, I'm actually going to change it. I actually had it lower. I'm going to have it a B+, actually.
Okay, so that is becoming the one that we disagree about the most. And I think the sticking point there are the wide receivers. I don't trust Evans in that offense, and I don't trust Jones without seeing it first. So I am going to also give this one a D+.
Woo! Okay. Yeah, wow, that's a huge disparity. We'll just see how it plays out. But that's every single team graded that is in the Beltway Wars Invitational. Pat, do you have anything else to add before we wrap this up?
No, it's going to be a great season. I'm looking forward to it, the 10th year. I think it'll be a fun one. Lots of interesting storylines in the NFL. Feels like, I don't know how you feel. I feel like there's a lot of new blood coming up in the NFL right now. It's kind of a turning point for me. I think a lot of the guys that we would be picking a couple years ago have kind of went a little bit more into the background, and you're seeing a lot of these young guys step up and become superstars. And it's fun to see. It's not the NFL that we grew up with. It's an exciting league to watch, given the offense that we're seeing these days. So I'm excited. Just housekeeping notes, schedules, I have to get those determined. So don't get too freaked out about if you're going to get smashed in week one based on the current projections. I still have to assign those schedules, and that's all going to be auto-generated based on the fact that you'll play your division opponents twice during the year, and you'll play every other team once. It's all done with a computer program, so it's all fair. I'm not going in there trying to figure things out on who I can beat in which week, but it's all automated. So stay tuned for that. And
Okay. That
good
sounds
luck.
great. This was fun, and hopefully that we'll be able to do a couple more of these during the year. Maybe even schedule some interviews with some managers during the course of the year to try to go over what their team is at that certain time, and maybe give them an opportunity to talk some trash to their upcoming opponent. And we will catch you all on the flip side. It was fun. See you later, everybody.
Bye.